Welcome to Ancient Circles. I'm Bob Kelly. Normally, we think of history as a straight line, one event after the other, causes and effects, dates and names. But traditional cultures have always looked at history as a cycle, where old themes play out in ever new shapes. We'll follow these cycles as they play out on a small, green, and poor island in the Atlantic Ocean. It happens to be the ancestral home for 40 million Americans. In these programs, you'll hear from scholars and druids, prisoners and politicians. You'll meet an ancient warrior queen and a fighter in the contemporary Irish women's movement. You'll hear of wars for gold and God in Ireland and the Americas. And if you find it hard to believe that all these things are connected, stay tuned. You'll find out why this program is called Ancient Circles. Like most other indigenous people, the Celts lived in harmony with Mother Earth. Life and death were seen as part of the same circle. All living things had a spirit that was part of a web of life. Tribal members did not see themselves as dominating nature, but as one strand in the web. The dogma of Christian religion came into direct conflict with this Celtic belief system when missionaries arrived on the island. In his 1983 book, The Way of Weird, British author Brian Bates recreates the first encounters between Christian monks and the spiritual teachers of Celtic society. The Druid explains,
"We are simple people with simple beliefs. We honor the sun, the moon, and the stars on account of their shining brightness. We believe in fire because of its sudden heat, also water and the earth because they nourish all things. To understand our ways, you must learn the true meaning of weird, not the version your masters have concocted to fit their beliefs. Remember that I told you our world began with fire and frost? By themselves, neither fire nor frost can accomplish anything, but together they create the world. Yet they must maintain a balance, for too much fire would melt the frost, and excessive frost would extinguish the fire. But just as the world of gods, Middle-earth and the dead are constantly replenished by the marrying of fire and frost, so also they depend upon the balance and eternal cycle of day and night, winter and summer, woman and man, weak and strong, moon and sun, death and life. These forces and countless others form the end points of a gigantic web of fibers which cover all worlds. The web is the creation of the forces and its threads, shimmering with power, it passes through everything."
This Celtic concept of the web of life has parallels in Native American philosophy as well. Listen to the words of Chief Seattle, read by American Indian Movement leader Vernon Belcourt.
"Whatever befalls the earth, befalls the people of the earth. We humans did not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand in it. What we do to the web, we do to ourselves. Tribe follows tribe, nation follows nation. Like the waves of the sea, it is the order of nature, and regret is useless. Your time of decay may be distant, but it will surely come. For even the white man whose God walked and talked among them as friend to friend could not be exempt from the common destiny. We may be family after all. We will see."
The spiritual belief system of the Celtic people first came under attack when the Roman Empire started to expand northward in the 1st and 2nd centuries BC. By 60 AD, the Roman armies had successfully invaded France, Switzerland, and Celtic Britain. Their final destination was the Celts' sacred island, Ireland. Their motive was one that would become familiar in world history, the lust for gold. Seamus McManus, in his book, The Story of the Irish Race, writes,
Ireland was rich in gold. It was the one country above all others in Western Europe that was distinguished for its gold wealth. The ancient gold of Scandinavia came chiefly from Ireland. The gold ornaments preserved in the National Museum in Dublin weigh 570 ounces, while in the British Museum the total gold ornament collection from England, Wales, and Scotland combined is only 50 ounces.
The Roman Emperor Nero had heard of Ireland's Wicklow Mountain gold, traded throughout Europe along an ancient Celtic route. What he hadn't heard was that while the Roman Empire used gold as money, its use by the Celts was religious in nature. Their beautiful golden objects were crafted under the watchful eyes of the Druid high priests. In addition to being displayed as a sign of personal status, these objects were thrown into sacred wells and buried in tombs as offerings to their gods. This fundamental difference in attitude has persisted for 2,000 years, as conquering armies ravished the lands of indigenous people who were unlucky enough to have gold. The native people of the Americas, Australia, and Africa are only the latest victims of this mentality.
Well, you see, the Black Hills was a very special place.
Bill Means is Executive Director of the International Indian Treaty Council.
The Black Hills was the center of our nation. We are the people of the Black Hills, the Lakota people. And this is where our creation story takes place. So to us, the Black Hills means as much to our people as the Vatican means to the Roman Catholic Church, or what Jerusalem means to Christians and Muslims and Jews, because we live primarily on the plains. But the Black Hills was a place where our people were buried, where we went to fasts, where we went for very special reasons. So it was a very special place, and the discovery of gold there really almost brought about the total desecration of this very sacred place. The Black Hills was part of a treaty agreement in which the United States negotiated with our people, the Lakota Nation, final treaty being in 1868. And after that treaty was signed, gold was discovered. And once gold was discovered, and then of course the army came in order to protect the settlers who were moving in with the miners into the Black Hills. So of course our Indian people, in defending their lands, were then banded as criminals. And then our nation, which was set aside in the 1868 treaty, was subsequently divided up into 6 reservations. And so then the policy of apartheid was begun as a result of the quest for gold.
Throughout the history of gold-driven conquest, destroying indigenous spiritual structures was a top priority. The Romans struggled hard to conquer Celtic Britain, and they knew that ultimate success would depend on breaking their enemies' cultural cohesiveness. With this in mind, they invaded the island of Mona off Britain's northwestern coast. This was where hundreds of Druid priests from throughout Europe had taken refuge. Researchers Ann Ross and Don Robbins describe the scene in their book, The Life and Death of a Druid Prince.
The Romans faced an armed mass of Celts intermingled with Druids, both men and women, shrieking curses upon them. The sight was so weird and unnerving that at first the legionnaires stood watching in terror, unable to move. This was the Druids' first important and concerted appearance upon the stage of world history. It was also to be their last.
That day in 60 A.D. marks a watershed in Celtic history, for it was precisely here that the oral spiritual traditions of the Celtic nations came into contact with an invading army using a written history. The Romans, I'm sure you remember, were the first really well-armed and organized thieves who wrote their own press releases. Howard Zinn, author of A People's History of the United States, thinks we need to be careful when reading the stories of conquest in our history books.
We must not accept the memory of states as our own. Nations are not communities and never have been. The history of any country conceals fierce conflicts of interest between the conquerors and the conquered, masters and slaves, capitalists and workers, dominators and dominated in race and sex. And in such a world of conflict, a world of victims and executioners, It is the duty of thinking people not to be on the side of the executioners.